I wasn't born with much, except maybe an inconvenient amount of hope. I was the middle child in a family that prized predictability, conservative jobs, polite mediocrity, and never dreaming beyond the boundaries of our small, beige town. My name's Rayanne. I'm 32 now. But back then, I was just the kid who talked too much about changing the world and didn't know when to shut up about dreams. We lived in a house that always smelled faintly of disinfectant and fried onions. My father was a civil servant, disciplined, emotionally distant, obsessed with respectability. My mother, a soft-spoken woman who wore disappointment like perfume. Then there were my siblings, Saif, the golden boy studying engineering, and Nyla, the family darling with her flawless grades and medical aspirations. And then me, the one who filled notebooks with ideas for mobile apps, drew logos in my schoolbooks, and watched motivational videos when I thought no one was looking. I remember the first time I told them what I wanted to do. It was during one of those strained Friday dinners when the air was thick with passive judgment. My plate was barely touched as I cleared my throat and said, I want to build a tech startup. The silence was instant, then sharp. Nyla snorted into her glass. A what? A startup, I repeated, heart pounding. Like a company. I've been learning to code. There's this idea I have for. Saif cut me off with a grin. A tech company? Bro, you can barely fix the Wi-Fi. Laughter erupted. Even my mother chuckled low, tired. Beta, dreams are nice, she said, but we don't have the luxury for fantasies. Be realistic. My father didn't laugh. He just shook his head like I had spit on the family name. You're not serious, he muttered. You want to throw away your future for some internet nonsense? I am serious, I said quietly. I've been studying. I have plans. I'm learning about business, coding, venture capital. Beta, we don't even know what you're saying, my mother sighed. You always talk big. Finish your degree. Do something stable. We're not like those people who take risks. And there it was. We're not like those people. They meant rich people. People with safety nets. People with encouragement. People whose families believed in them. They didn't mean us. They meant me. The worst part wasn't that they didn't believe in my dream. It was how easily they dismissed me. Like my mind was a clown show. Like my ambition was a joke. For the next few weeks, the mood changed whenever I walked into a room. Saif teased me constantly. Hey CEO, he'd smirk. Launch your company yet or still dreaming in your pajamas? Nyla once waved her stethoscope in front of me and said, at least mine's real. I stopped bringing up my ideas. Stopped showing them the sketches. Stopped hoping. But inside, something was simmering. Something I hadn't felt before. Not just sadness, but fury. Not just ambition, but vengeance. I began to isolate myself. Late at night, while everyone else was asleep, I sat in my room watching free coding tutorials on YouTube. I couldn't afford a course, so I took notes like my life depended on it. I built ugly websites on free platforms just to test what I could do. I studied business models. I learned about angel investors. I Googled every single term I didn't understand. And each time I wanted to give up, I heard their laughter echo in my head. You want to throw away your future. You always talk big. You're not serious? Every insult was a brick in the wall I was building between the old me, the desperate for approval me, and the version of me who would walk into this house one day wearing a suit worth more than their car. But it wasn't easy. I failed again and again. My first 3 ideas went nowhere. One app got 5 downloads. Another crashed every time it launched. My laptop broke. I worked shifts at a convenience store just to save up for a refurbished one. And still, they kept laughing, oblivious to how close I was to snapping. Once, I overheard my father telling a neighbor, Rayanne? Oh, he's finding himself. I don't expect much. He didn't say it cruelly. He said it like a fact. Like I was a permanent footnote in the family album. The shame burned so deep I couldn't speak for a full day. But I didn't break. I stopped caring about family dinners. I skipped them when I could. When I did show up, I sat in silence, smiling at their jokes like I wasn't bleeding inside. They didn't know I was already building something behind the curtain. They didn't know my fourth idea was starting to take shape, an education platform with short, digestible lessons for mobile users in low-income countries. I built the first prototype with every spare second I had. No one saw me working. No one asked. No one cared. And that was fine, because I had made a promise to the boy they laughed at. One day, I would show them what it looked like when a foolish dreamer built an empire from ashes. Not for their approval, not even for revenge, but because somewhere inside me, I knew what I was capable of. And someday they'd know too. Time passed like wet cement, slow, heavy, and suffocating. On the surface, nothing changed. I was still the lost one, still living at home, still not bringing in a real income. Saif had started his engineering job and began dressing like a corporate poster boy. Nyla got accepted into med school and suddenly became the official pride of the family. And me? I was invisible, a ghost who haunted his own home. But underneath it all, my hands were busy shaping something real. Every morning, after a shallow few hours of sleep, I'd take my mother's scoffs about not helping around the house and my father's disgusted glances as punishment for my double life. I didn't complain. I couldn't afford the energy. My platform, MindBridge, was taking form. I'd finally found the right stack, refined the UX, and connected with a small group of freelance educators who were willing to record microlessons for cheap. One was in Nigeria, another in Bangladesh. We shared the same hunger. I tested everything on borrowed devices at the convenience store during my shifts. Sometimes I'd sit on the stockroom floor during breaks, coding with one hand and eating stale sandwiches with the other. To everyone else, it looked like I was stuck. But I was learning what they didn't teach in school. How to build with broken tools, how to lead without followers, how to dream when everyone around you is wide awake, but blind. I remember one night in particular. It was around 2 a.m. A monsoon was tearing through the neighborhood, wind slamming against the windows, thunder rolling like war drums. Everyone in the house was asleep. And I was crying in front of my cracked screen. Not out of defeat, out of pride. Because I'd just seen the first student complete a lesson on MindBridge from Kenya. The message popped up. This helped me. I didn't understand this before. Thank you. It was small, but it was everything. Still, I had no one to tell. No one would have understood. So I kept it to myself. Another secret added to the growing vault behind my smile. But the quiet hustle came at a cost. I started losing weight. I'd forget to eat, forget to rest. My mother scolded me for looking sick. My father accused me of being lazy. I remember him saying, "Even if you wanted a job, no one would hire you looking like that." Saif laughed. "Maybe you can start a startup for people who want to nap professionally." I laughed too, to hide how close I was to breaking. But inside, every insult was fuel. I kept a notebook, just a worn-out journal, and every time someone said I'd fail, I wrote it down. Page after page. Insult after insult. I called it the Book of Fire. Sometimes I opened it just to remind myself why I couldn't quit. Around that time, I entered a startup competition. It was a long shot. I had no connections, no reputation, just an idea and a shaky prototype. I submitted the pitch deck and forgot about it. Life went on. So did the ridicule. A week later, the email came. I'd been selected as a finalist. They were flying me to Dubai for the final pitch round. All expenses paid. Potential investors watching. I stared at the screen for a full minute. Then, without thinking, I ran downstairs into the kitchen where my parents were drinking tea. I got in. I blurted, "I'm going to Dubai for a startup pitch." They liked my app. They both just blinked. My father frowned. "Who's they?" I tried to explain. Told them about the competition, the judges, the exposure. My mother said flatly, "And you think this is safe? You're just going to get on a plane like that?" "It's a scam," my father muttered. "No one gives you free tickets unless there's a catch. Don't be stupid." Saif walked in and said, "Wow, look at Elon Musk over here." I stood there for a long time, just standing. Then I nodded, quietly turned around, and walked back upstairs. I cried that night, but not because they didn't believe me. I cried because it no longer hurt. I had outgrown the need for their approval. I went to Dubai alone. I pitched in front of 6 investors in a glass building that looked like a spaceship. I had 30 minutes. My hands shook. My voice cracked. But when I talked about what I'd built, what it could do for students around the world, I felt like fire. They listened. They asked questions. And one of them, Rajiv Khanna, a venture capitalist from Singapore, pulled me aside afterward and said, "You remind me of myself 20 years ago. Let's talk." 2 weeks later, he wired $25,000 into my new business account. It wasn't much in startup terms. But for me, it was $1 million worth of validation. I didn't tell my family. Not yet. I needed them to keep seeing me as a failure. Because the best revenge is always served in silence, until it's too late to ignore. So I came home, dropped my bag, and slid right back into the role of the hopeless dreamer. Saif asked, "So, how was the scam?" I smiled. "Pretty educational." He laughed. And I smiled wider. Because they still didn't know. They had no idea the foundation of my empire had already been laid. And I was just getting started. The first month after the investment, everything moved fast, like life had finally taken off after years of being stuck in neutral. I registered Mindbridge officially, signed up for a co-working space downtown, and started hiring part-time help. I found a brilliant back-end developer from Lahore and a content lead from Delhi, both people who had faced rejection, just like me. We worked like our lives depended on it because, in many ways, they did. The app's UI was sleeker now. The lessons were sharper. We built a dashboard for progress tracking, gamified rewards for students, and even onboarded our first school client in Nairobi, who paid a modest subscription fee. Then came a small write-up in a local tech blog. Pakistani startup tackles global education inequality with just a laptop and a dream. I didn't tell my family, but I saw my dad reading the article on his phone later that week, squinting, then quietly flipping past it. He didn't recognize the name. I wasn't listed as the founder, just a 26-year-old from Karachi. I didn't need him to recognize me. Not yet. What hit harder was Saif's comment over dinner. "So, I heard some idiot from Karachi's trying to teach the world with WhatsApp videos or something. Bro, even LinkedIn is laughing at him." I said nothing. But later that night, I printed that article, folded it neatly, and placed it between page 22 and 23 of the Book of Fire. Fuel. Always more fuel. Then the real turning point came. Our app hit 10,000 users. It happened on a random Thursday. I was sitting on a cracked bench outside the co-working space, eating street bun kebab. The back-end dev messaged, "Bro, check the numbers." I nearly dropped my food. I opened the analytics dashboard, and there it was, 10,134 active users in 9 different countries. Nigeria, Kenya, Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan, Indonesia, the Philippines, Uganda, and Sri Lanka. And the server was holding up. We had done it. Without press. Without favors. Without any family support. Just pure will. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and for the first time in years breathed. But I still didn't tell anyone at home. Instead, I started changing silently. I started dressing better. Not flashy, just cleaner. Crisp black shirts, fitted jeans, subtle watches. Saif noticed. "Oh wow, Mr. Startup's got style now." "Just trying not to look like a loser," I replied casually. He laughed but watched me more carefully from then on. My mother started asking less about job applications and more about where I was going. My father grew quieter. Then one day, I came home in an Uber Black. I just met with a tech incubator in Islamabad who wanted to discuss scaling. The meeting went well. I didn't expect it, but they offered a follow-up with angel investors and a possible grant. When I walked in, keys in my hand, still buzzing from the conversation, my father looked up from his newspaper and said, "Whose car is that outside?" I shrugged. "Just a ride." "You spending someone else's money?"
"No,
"Just mine."
he scoffed.
"You don't have money." I met his eyes. Calmly. "You sure about that?" That was the first time he didn't have a response. Later that night, My mother came into my room and sat on the edge of my bed, something she hadn't done in years. "You've changed," she said. I looked at her. "In a good way or a bad way?" "I'm not sure yet," she replied honestly. I appreciated that. At least it wasn't fake praise. But nothing, not the downloads, not the meetings, not the investments, compared to what happened a month later. I got invited to speak at the Global Tech Youth Conference in Singapore. All expenses paid. They even offered an honorarium. This time, I booked my ticket without hesitation. And when I stood on that stage, in front of hundreds of tech enthusiasts, entrepreneurs, and potential investors, something clicked inside me. I wasn't chasing validation anymore. I was leading. The applause after my presentation felt unreal. One investor even told me, "I can see this turning into something massive. You're solving a real problem." I didn't smile out of arrogance. I smiled because they finally saw me. Not the failure. Not the dreamer. The builder. The man. When I returned home, I didn't sneak in like before. I walked through the front door, dropped my suitcase, and called out, "I'm back." My father looked up, startled. My mother came from the kitchen, wiping her hands. Saif peeked from the hallway. "You went somewhere?" I nodded, pulled out my phone, and tossed it on the table. On the screen was a photo of me on stage in Singapore with a mic in hand and Mindbridge behind me on a giant LED screen. They all stared. No one said anything. For a long time. Then Saif picked up the phone, zoomed in, scrolled. He raised an eyebrow. "You were really there?" "Yep." "Wait, is this real?" "As real as it gets." My father cleared his throat, but said nothing. My mother looked at me like she was trying to solve a puzzle. "You didn't tell us," she said softly. "You wouldn't have believed me," I replied. And for the first time, no one laughed. No one rolled their eyes. They were quiet, because now, the dream they mocked was standing in front of them in flesh and blood, bigger than their expectations, brighter than their imagination. It wasn't just real. It was undeniable. The air in the living room that night felt different. It wasn't just that I had returned from an international conference. It was that they knew. They had seen proof, me on stage, applause in the background, and my company name blazing in lights. They couldn't unsee it. But no one said anything for days. The silence in our house stretched long and cold, like a frozen river holding back a flood. I started spending more time outside, meetings, planning for the next phase of the app, and networking with people who saw me as a peer, not a joke. I didn't flaunt my success. I didn't have to. But something inside me had shifted. And something inside them had too. I noticed the way Saif would pause when I walked into a room. How his usual arrogance dulled just a bit. My father stopped making sarcastic comments. My mother hovered more, asking where I was going, if I'd eaten, if I needed anything. They didn't say sorry. They never would. But their silence was heavy with something that hadn't been there before, respect, and a touch of fear. Then one night, it all came crashing forward. It was after dinner. We were all sitting in the lounge, a rare moment of forced family time. The news was playing in the background, but no one was watching. Saif broke the silence first. "So, are you like, rich now or something?" he asked, half joking, half serious. I looked up from my phone. "Why do you ask?" "Just curious. You're never home. Always working. Traveling. Making speeches. It's like, you're someone else." I smiled. "I am someone else. Just not someone you ever thought I could be." He flinched. My mother placed her teacup down carefully. "Beta, that's not fair." "We were just concerned." "No." I interrupted, my tone calm but firm. "You weren't concerned. You laughed. All of you. Every time I mentioned building something, you shut it down. You called me lazy. A disgrace. A failure." I turned to my father, who was staring blankly ahead. "And you, Dad? You used to say I was wasting my life. That I'd end up begging. That dreams don't feed stomachs." He didn't move. I continued, voice rising slightly. "You humiliated me at dinner tables. Told relatives I was lost. All because I didn't fit your version of success. A job in an office, a desk, a chair, and blind obedience." Saif scoffed. Man, it wasn't that serious. I looked him dead in the eye. To you, maybe. But every word you said, I carried it. Every laugh, every insult, it burned. And I turned that fire into fuel. There was a pause. A long one. My father finally spoke. What do you want, huh? A medal? A trophy? A parade, because you made some money? I leaned in, voice steady.
No, I don't want anything.
Not from you. Not anymore. He gritted his teeth. Then why are you still here? Because this is still my house too, I said. And unlike you, I don't throw people out just because they disappoint me. That hit hard. He clenched his jaw, but said nothing more.
My mother started to cry.
Quietly. The kind of tears that don't ask for attention, but bleed from years of guilt. I didn't know you were hurting like that, she whispered. I didn't either, I replied. Not until I stopped needing your approval. And that was the real transformation. It wasn't the money, or the success, or the app. It was that I no longer needed them to believe in me. I believed in myself. After that night, the house felt even quieter. But it wasn't awkward, it was awakening. I could feel them recalibrating who I was in their minds. My father didn't apologize, but he started asking questions. How does your app make money? Who do you partner with? What's next? Saif followed me on LinkedIn and liked every post I made. My mother started preparing my favorite meals again, biryani on Sundays, custard with crushed biscuits on Thursdays. And one morning, she knocked on my door and said, I saved something for you. It was an old drawing of mine, a rough sketch of an app interface I'd made years ago. I had shown it to her once, excited, and she had brushed it off. Now it was laminated and framed. I kept it. I just didn't know what to do with it, she said, eyes glossy. I took it from her gently. For the first time, I realized forgiveness wasn't a surrender. It was power. The more I let go of my anger, the more I freed myself. But I didn't forget. I couldn't forget the nights I cried silently, wondering if I'd ever be seen. Or the afternoons spent staring at cracked ceilings, wondering if it was all in vain. Or the birthdays no one celebrated because I was too old to be babied and too broke to matter. Now, everything had changed. I had investors lining up, school contracts multiplying. Even media outlets were reaching out for interviews. And every time I stood in front of a camera or boardroom, I remembered my family's laughter. Not to spite them, but to honor the version of me who kept going. That kid deserved everything I had now. And so much more. Eventually, I moved out. I bought a sleek apartment in Clifton, overlooking the sea. Glass walls, polished floors, and sunlight that flooded every corner. I invited them over once. They came. Uncomfortable, impressed, overwhelmed. My father sat stiffly on the leather couch. Saif wandered through the living room in awe. My mother smiled through tears, holding onto my arm like she was afraid I'd disappear. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't look what I've become. It was a quiet reclamation. I had risen from the ashes of their disbelief. And now I soared above it all, not in spite of their laughter, but because of it. It was a cool November evening when I received the email that would change everything. Again. Subject: Government Partnership Proposal, Youth Innovation Initiative. I stared at the screen, barely breathing. My app, once a simple idea sketched on the back of a notebook, had been shortlisted for a nationwide government-funded expansion. If accepted, we would be granted millions in funding and access to schools across the country. I blinked twice, then laughed. It was the kind of laugh that echoed through your bones, the laugh of someone who had survived storms, ridicule, and rejection, only to rise higher than anyone ever expected. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork, meetings, media coverage, and strategic planning. Everything felt surreal. But amidst the chaos, a thought kept resurfacing. I need to return to where it all began. Not the house, not the city, but the one place I had buried deep in my memories. My old school, the very building where I'd once been called a daydreamer, a waste of potential, not focused enough to succeed. The place where teachers had told me to be realistic and where classmates had mocked me for doodling interfaces during math class. I called ahead and arranged a visit. When I arrived, dressed in a crisp black suit and carrying a leather-bound presentation folder, the receptionist's jaw dropped slightly. "You're the same Ahmad?" she asked. I nodded with a smile. "The very same." The principal greeted me personally. "It's an honor to have you back," he said, almost apologetically. Funny how respect arrives late, but still makes an entrance. They gave me a tour. The same faded walls, the same dusty trophies, and the same courtyard where I had once sat alone, dreaming of something, anything, that would make me feel seen. Now I was being ushered into the auditorium as a guest speaker. Rows of students sat before me, their eyes bright with curiosity. I told them everything. About the nights I cried myself to sleep. About the rejection, the failure, the mockery, even from my own family. And how I never stopped believing that I was meant for more. "You are not your circumstances," I told them. "You are not what others label you. You are what you fight for when no one is watching." When I finished, the room erupted into applause. But the real twist came after the speech. As I exited the auditorium, I saw him, Sir Bilal, my old math teacher, the one who had once said, "You'll never make it if you keep chasing fantasies." He stood frozen, clipboard in hand. "Ahmad," he said, unsure whether to smile or shrink. "Sir Bilal," I greeted, extending my hand. He shook it awkwardly. "I saw your interview on Geo News last week. Incredible work. Just incredible." There was a pause between us. I could have thrown his words back at him. I could have reminded him of the way he laughed when I said I wanted to build an app for student support. But I didn't. Instead, I said, "Thank you for pushing me, even if it was in the wrong way. It taught me to push back harder." He nodded slowly, swallowing his pride. Sometimes the best revenge is grace. A few weeks later, I stood in front of a camera at the official signing of the government partnership. Dignitaries shook my hand. Journalists shouted questions. My name was trending on Twitter. And sitting in the front row, invited by me, was my entire family. My father wore a traditional kurta and didn't say much. But his eyes never left me. My mother beamed like the sun. Saif clapped louder than anyone else. And then came the final twist. After the ceremony, a woman approached me. Late 30s, sharp features, eyes familiar. "Mr. Ahmad," she asked. "I'm a representative of FutureLink Ventures. We're a Silicon Valley firm looking to invest in South Asian innovation. We've been following your work. We'd like to offer you a $10 million valuation for your company and help you scale globally." I blinked, then smiled. Full circle. I turned toward my family. They had overheard. My father's face went pale. Saif nearly choked on his drink. And I felt nothing but peace. Later that night, at dinner, my father finally spoke. "I may not have been the best father to you," he said quietly. Silence fell around the table. "But seeing what you've done, what you've built, you've proved us all wrong. And I'm proud of you, son. Truly." The room held its breath. I looked at him, the man who had once told me I was a failure. And I said, "Thank you, Baba. That means more than you know." That night, I sat alone on my apartment balcony, the city lights stretching infinitely before me. I had everything I ever wanted, and more. But what mattered most wasn't the money, the fame, or the applause. It was that I hadn't given up on myself, even when everyone else had.
And now?
Now I was living proof that no matter how loud they laugh at your dreams, your success will speak louder. If you're still with me, then maybe, just maybe, you felt what I felt. Maybe someone told you that your dream was too big, too foolish, or too unrealistic. Maybe they laughed when you dared to imagine something different for yourself. Maybe the people closest to you became the loudest voices of doubt. Let me tell you something I wish someone had told me back then. You do not need permission to believe in yourself. You don't need a round of applause to begin. You don't need your family's approval to chase the life that lights your soul on fire. I used to think success was about proving them wrong. But I've learned that the real success is proving your younger self right. That version of you who cried quietly into the pillow after being laughed at. That version who whispered dreams into the night, afraid someone might hear and mock them. That version who still believed, even when the world told them not to. This journey hasn't just been about making money or building a business. It's been about reclaiming my identity, about honoring the quiet fire inside me that refused to die, even when it felt like I was drowning in doubt. And the truth? Your dream doesn't have to make sense to anyone else. It doesn't have to fit into a box, follow a timeline, or meet anyone's expectations but your own. Because you're the only one who sees the full picture. The only one who understands the fire behind your idea, the purpose behind your passion, and the storm you've walked through to get here. If you're standing at the edge of your dream, afraid to leap, do it anyway. If you're tired of being the family joke, the one they whisper about at dinners, the one they say will figure it out eventually, let them talk. One day, your silence will become a roar. One day, your consistency will become credibility. One day, your belief will become your breakthrough. And when that day comes, you won't need revenge. You'll be too busy living the life they said you'd never have. I don't share my story to boast. I share it to remind you, your dream is valid. Your vision is real. Your time is coming. Let them laugh. Let them doubt. Just don't you dare stop. Because the world doesn't change when people play it safe. It changes when someone dares to dream anyway. And if no one has told you yet, I believe in you. Now go out there and prove yourself right.